Why does it have to be like this? Why would a nation be at war with itself? North and South Korea are the same. Both are Korean. Many have family in the opposite region. People in the north have family in the south, and people in the south have relatives in the north. I can tell you why the situation has gotten so bad, and I'll give some personal examples as well. The history is that the Russians and the Americans were occupying the northern and southern regions of Korea after Japan surrendered at the end of World War II. The original plan was for the Russians to withdraw, and for all of Korea to become a democratic nation. That's right, North Korea was not meant to exist. But with the politics and everything happening, both nations remained inside Korea against the Korean people's will. Joseph Stalin installed a puppet regime in the north headed by Kim Il-sung, and the United States put up a friendly government by Yi Seung-man in the south. The Koreans had heard of what a communist government was capable of, so almost immediately after the northern regime was established, people began to flee and head south, or even into China through Manchuria. Once China was also under communist control, they did not want a democratic and developed Korea right next to them. They were supportive of the northern regime, because if Korea was democratic and prosperous, they might want to retake Manchuria, which is actually ancestral Korean land under the name of Goryeo. Not much is known about the north, but I'll tell you something a friend told me. This takes place in the mid-1970s. My friend's family lives in one of the regions of the south that borders the north, so it was somewhat common to see refugees fleeing from the north at that time, and there were rumors about what was going on in the north as well. My friend's grandparents fled the north. They were originally from Gyeongwon-do, and now they live in Gyeongwon-do, the neighboring province in South Korea. Her parents wanted to help a relative who was in the north, but afraid to escape out of fear of death. So a plan was devised where her father would sneak into North Korea, meet up with the family member, and escape back to South Korea. The demilitarized zone was not fortified as much as it is now, so it was relatively easy to find a weak point of entry. So her father snuck into North Korea. Once he cut a hole through the simple fence, he ran for a long time. He was shocked at what the scenery was like. There was nothing. No grass, no trees, nothing. The northern regime was theorized to have stripped the land bare. This is why there was a severe food crisis in the 1990s. There's nothing for farmland. Everything's gone in the region. My friend's father finally found the town where the relative lived. To this day, he's not sure which town it was. Some regions of the north were renamed once the communist regime took power. It was a rural town. Nothing. Everything was bare, and the people who lived there looked like they had no souls. All the buildings were Stalinist communes. He stayed in a rural storage closet for an entire day just looking through a window to see who was around. The next day he finally ventured out of the shed, but kept his composure. He actually spoke the dialect of Korean that the northern speakers use, so he did not raise any suspicions. He spent half the day looking for his relative, and he finally found him along with his wife. They hatched a plan to escape the next day, so my friend's father went back to the storage shed and tried to get some sleep. As you can imagine, it was hard for him to get any sleep, so on the morning of the third day, he noticed a child playing near a river. An older woman and man beckoned the child to come over to them, as the child naturally obeyed. He saw the older man strike the child on the back of the head with a metal pipe, while the woman distracted him. The older woman then dragged the child into the rower house where she lived with her husband. When my friend's father asked his relative about what had happened, he told him that it happens every so often. Cannibalism. There was nearly no food in North Korea for the people, even at that time. So as not to starve, people would sometimes lure children to their homes and kill them, and then boil their bodies in ogni, earthenware jars meant to store kimchi. He could not believe his ears when he heard this. In certain European cultures, meat can be put into a boiling hot container and the meat would be stewed. This is how the flesh was cooked. over a flame, and the water would make the meat soft for consumption. This is how some people in this village got their meat. So my friend's father's relative and wife got their few belongings, which was a few family pictures and papers, and headed south. It took them another day, but they were finally able to reach the DMZ and freedom. Once the three of them were safely across, my friend's father looked to his relative and said, "You're free." The relative just knelt down and touched the ground. There was grass on it, as his wife did the same thing. They hadn't seen anything like it in such a long time, as the both of them soon cried after. The two of them lived the rest of their lives in peace in the South. After the mid-1970s, the North began to reinforce their side of the DMZ to prevent people from fleeing to the South. Stories like this can be heard from people who had escaped from the North. What I just said was the truth. Everything in the story, even though some of it might be difficult or disturbing to believe, is all true. When my friend's father told his parents and some other people about it, they refused to believe it. Koreans killing Koreans and eating their flesh? It's denial. That's what I think. People of the same nationality doing that to one another. While the South has prospered from its capitalistic and democratic model and has great international foreign relations, the North has suffered and declined under its communist and junta ideologies and has little contact with the outside world. Many say that most of Korea remains stuck in a time warp. Technology for most of the population remains that of the 1970s. When you see footage of Koreans in the North, their clothes show their age. They are made with outdated technology. There is no such thing as fashion or self-expression at all. The internet also does not exist, as the television stations in North Korea are only a few from what I hear. I asked my friend what she thought of Korea being reunified. She says she would not want that. I asked her why. She told me that there was too many problems with reunification. This does make sense. If the northern regime collapses, the South will have to deal with a brainwashed and traumatized population. We're talking about more than 24 million people to be rehabilitated, as well as developing the North, which has remained unmodernized, as well as repairing the environment, which has also been destroyed by the northern regime. I told her that it's not the people's fault. It's the fault of the government. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. They're all to blame, not the people. She understood what I meant because when the time comes, when the northern regime finally collapses, this could possibly be the worst humanitarian crisis in history, and this is something that the southern government will have to deal with. You may have noticed that I rarely use the names North and South Korea, mostly the North for North Korea and the South for South Korea. Koreans do this because they refuse to believe that the Korean peninsula is divided. I know some Koreans, they are good people, as this whole division is very personal with many families. This has torn the soul of the Korean nation and the Korean people apart. And even if Korea is unified under the South Korean government, there will still be scars, both physical and emotional, for generations afterward. I don't like to see bad things happen to good people. It's so sad. My heart really goes out to them. So if you're a Korean, comment. If you know a Korean, show this video to them and tell them to comment. Because this is a video that every Korean needs to see and listen to, as well as think about, because there is no North and South, just one Korea.